Thank you. So International Aid for Disasters. Sounds so wonderful. There's a disaster, and we're out there to help. We're out there to save lives and save the world. How sustainable is it? So in order to understand, we need first of all to define a disaster. And this is the way the disaster is defined, as being a mishap, something bad that happens, which exceeds the ability of the population inflicted to deal with it. And as a result, it disrupts society. So in fact, the real goals of assistance to people who cannot fend for themselves is to respond to their needs, is to help in rehabilitating after a disaster, to study the causes in order to prevent the next disaster. Sounds very simple. And it's even described in this graphic form, where when the disaster hits, there is an emergency response, and this is when CNN takes pictures, and when you see it on your own TV screen every evening, this is when you want to go and do, and everybody is there. NGOs and governments and all kinds of people who come to help. And then, not for nothing, there is a void here, because everybody goes home. And the locals are left to rehabilitate and reconstruct, and sometimes there is a positive outcome in which there is development, further development of the afflicted people and country. The next stage is to prevent the next disaster by mitigation, by preparedness, and by a warning system. So who is hit worst? Just like you heard before. The low-income communities are the ones that are hit. Middle income and high income are better off when a disaster hits. Let's take a few examples. And these are disasters that, in a way, I was involved in, so I'm not talking off the top of my head or describing you the literature or telling you what New York Times wrote last night. There was hunger in Ethiopia because of drought. And this chubby little fellow actually has kwashiorkor. And what you see here is neither muscle nor fat, it's water, because it does not have enough protein and enough calories in its diet. So, is that a surprise? No, it is not a surprise, because food production in Ethiopia went downhill from the 80s. These are the last days of Mengistu regime, which was about when Ethiopia hit bottom. So some disasters can be predicted. And the response doesn't have to be so acute and immediate and come this week or else the disaster will be over. And this is not very commonly the case. Let's take Hurricane Katrina. Was this really a disaster? Did this disrupt society? Did this exceed the ability of the local people to cope? I doubt it very much. So the USA didn't really need any help. So why did a mission from Israel come? Well, I have myself to blame for this in part. I was called by Ms. Galuski, who said, what kind of vaccinations do we need? It started like this. Are you an infectious disease doctor? I said, yes. What kind of vaccinations do we need for New Orleans? I said, why are you going to New Orleans? She said, I have a mission with mental health specialists and a team of police divers to dive in murky waters and look for dead bodies. I said, do you have a medical team? She said, no. I said, yes, you do. And I came with another doctor and 2 medical students from the School for International Health and Medicine to help. So what we found there was people coming back to their homes, which were flooded, to look for their pet animals, we found that they needed to be vaccinated against infections that could lurk in the murky waters. And this here was my medical student who ended up being a psychiatrist trained at Yale University who deals with PTSD up to this day. So somehow, this involvement was formative in her career development. So the dog is using the air-conditioned, beautiful ambulance of the urgent care, which wasn't needed for anything else. And the civil guard is actually giving water to a stray bull because people become very warm-hearted and feel for animals that are in distress. Is this a disaster? No, but the one I'm talking about now definitely is. A volcanic eruption cut the city of Goma in the Congo into two parts, with a river of lava in the center. And it severed the airport, electricity, water supply, fuel. There was nothing. Everything was gone. So 17 different non-governmental organizations came to the rescue, and the UN, and the International Committee of the Red Cross, and the Israeli government decided they want to send a mission of 2 doctors, and 2 of the teachers of NSIH, Professor Zagorski and myself, were sent by the Israeli Foreign Office to Kinshasa to go to Goma and help. Who are we going to work with? The WHO. Fine. This is Mr. Mukta, head of WHO for Goma. This is his office, torched by the lava. And it was a very strange situation because his French was perfect. His English was very poor. My French is very poor, and I tried to speak in English and French until we found out that he was raised in Chad, and his second language is Arabic. And we started to crack jokes in Arabic, and we became like brothers, and it turned around the whole situation in which Mr. Mukta was very unhappy with our presence and said, I don't know what to do with you. And then he realized that we could do a survey of all the health care facilities in the area. And we ran around with a car and surveyed the area. The bottom line was that we suggested that everybody should be vaccinated against measles. On the last day of the survey, we walked through the lava to a remote clinic, and there were 2 healthcare workers with a cool box vaccinating children. How scary do you think it is when they do what you ask them to do? Was it a surprise? This kid is standing on lava deposited in the eruption in the 70s. And he's looking away from the newly deposited river of lava that covered his city. So it was not a surprise. The woman here told me that the first time that she knew that the earth is not black was when she traveled to Kinshasa. Because everything there is volcanic and eruptions are common. So they distributed food and water. They opened a feeding center for children. You can't see this here, but these are African black children with red hair because of malnutrition, which started long before the eruption. And then you go on the street and you find out that where there is no electricity and there is no fuel, people from the neighboring villages in the jungle would come with bags of coal carried on bicycles which are made at home out of wood. Now, how about that for resilience and for self-help? So the last of the examples that I want to give you is a tremendous earthquake in northern India, which shattered the town of Bhuj. And the trouble was that the whole city was in shambles. But this is India, so the market reopened, even the computer shop was in business again, and we came there about 10 months after the event. And this picture tells the whole story. The modern buildings, as they call them, Paka houses, were all destroyed. The rebuilding was the same as the destroyed houses, while the thatched, round huts survived. So we decided, with the help of a wonderful Israeli architect, to rebuild and redo the round houses of their traditional building system out of mud. And this is the architect who is starting the thatch for the roof. And then a cupboard is built inside by local ladies. And this is the end result. Cost of materials for this whole contraction of 2 houses, which now are a trading center for traditional handcraft made by these village people, was $3,000 out of the pocket of 25 Israelis who came to build it. It was built in 10 days. The locals volunteered their work. And a lot of people came by and said, oh, for years and years, this metal hasn't been used. This is beautiful. So maybe we succeeded in building something more durable which will withstand the next earthquake. So do we do any good with our assistance in disasters? Do the local people really need us, or are we fulfilling our own needs? And can we match our ability and capabilities with the real need of the people? And last but not least, who are we accountable to? Is it the donors for the non-governmental organizations? Is it our government that sends us out? Is it an international organization that we work for? Or is it the people who are suffering and need our assistance? Thank you very much.